this event today. So this is a little bit about me. Andrew mentioned I was diagnosed with autism at 13 years old, which was late, but not too late. Because nowadays, and I will talk a little bit about autism as a whole, signs of autism can be shown as early as 18 to 24 months old in certain children. I also went to California State University, Northridge. I got my bachelor's degree in accounting and took the very difficult CPA exam as well. With the right level of determination and discipline, I passed it. And as he mentioned, I left accounting a year and a half ago in order to reach people on a personal level. I didn't want to spend the rest of my days crunching numbers, sitting at a desk all day. Because autism, as some of you may have, did anybody watch the United Nations coverage on Sunday on autism, World Autism Awareness Day? I'll talk a little bit about that. But basically, the potential of people with autism is being overlooked and underestimated. So for me to give a speech like this and for me to get my story up there will bring hope and inspiration to people that really need it. And the book, or first of all, I also do work with Toastmasters. It's a nonprofit organization that helps improve public speaking, communication, and leadership courses. And later this year, I'm going to be what's called a Distinguished Toastmaster. There are only about 4,000 of them in the world, and they are the lead examples of the best communicators and leaders in the world. And the book is expected to be out this summer, Come to Life. And the reason I came up with that title, I was in a room just like this at Cal State Northridge. I was the director of membership for the Accounting Association, talking to young accounting students. And I was telling them, I totally thought of it off the cuff, but I explained to these students, you're at that point where life no longer comes to you. It's up to you to come to life. Start making things happen for you. You want something, you work for it, you go get it, rather than just sitting around waiting for it to come to you. So I'm going to break the ice a little bit here, give you an example of some of the number talents that I have, because I went to accounting because I'm really good at math. Now there are 26 letters in the alphabet. A is 1, B is 2, and C is 3. What I can do is take words, give their letters a numerical value, and add them up as quick as a calculator. So let's say the name Tom. T is 20, and O is 15, and M is 13. You add these up, you get 48. And I do that really quickly. Would anybody like to volunteer their name and spelling so I can have the right number? Yes, you.
Arabella.
How do you spell it?
Arabella.
2 L's, that's good, I know that. It's 52. So this way you can get your calculator out. A1R18. Let's do 2 more and I'll move on to the next slide here. Anybody else like to give me their name and how it's spelled? Yes, Andrew? That was a self-explanatory one. Andrew, 64. And the last one?
Cheyenne. Cheyenne.
Like Wyoming?
Yeah, exactly.
I hope to go there one day. Cheyenne, you add up to 89. So this is an example of a hidden talent, and hopefully I have your attention and I will keep it for the remainder of this presentation. But people with autism have talents just like this, but oftentimes it's not known, or they don't know how to share it, or it may not translate to employment, for example. So I'm going to be talking today about, the clicker's been a little wonky today, so I may have to hit enter on this one here. That's what I will do. So I'm going to talk with you a little bit about how to identify the signs of autism and what it is to begin with, just to give you a little bit of a basic understanding. I'll talk about what I've learned over the years growing up with it and some of the challenges I had and how I overcame them. I'm going to talk about the meaning of life. These are some elements of life that people with autism particularly struggle with, and how I developed the mantra that was mentioned earlier: know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. So starting with what autism is. Now, I like to work in mnemonics and memory aids, so for those of you that have paper and pens, you'll be able to take notes and follow along with me. So autism is a pattern of differences, and that pattern translates to the mnemonic or memory aid SBC Global. Starting with the social aspects of autism. Autism is mainly identified by those social deficits found in the person that has it. And particularly from a young age, you may see a young person maybe playing in the corner, having his or her own fun. Like they like to line up their toys, play with Legos. I was that kid in the corner lining up my toys. I like Legos and Marvel Works. But because of this social deficit, the lack of experience they have in interacting with their peers, there are some cases where it's misinterpreted as that person doesn't want to have friends, or he's okay in the corner on his own. But there may be something else. At the United Nations, they mentioned still water runs deep. So a young person may be in the corner, maybe he or she attempted to interact with his peers, but failed, and they banished him to the corner. And that does happen from as young as preschool all the way up through high school, where the acceptance isn't there because the young people's, the peers, do not understand the differences. And as many of you know, we fear what we don't understand, or we fear different, and so the young person with autism gets ostracized, rejected. Looking at the behavioral differences, someone with autism might be doing some rocking in order to calm themselves down, regulate their environment. They might flap their hands, or they like certain textures, certain foods, or they do not like at all certain textures or certain foods. These are some examples of how someone with autism, and it's a spectrum disorder, so on one hand you've got those that may never talk or have limited verbal ability and may need someone like a caretaker for the rest of their lives. Then you've got someone on the other end of the spectrum, say someone with Asperger's syndrome, high functioning autism, and maybe not so much high functioning, but the proper term being they're savants, or they might look like geniuses, but much like that S, they may be so smart and so specialized in a certain topic, but they couldn't hold a conversation to save their life. And there have been many celebrities that are believed to have been on the autism spectrum: Albert Einstein, Thomas Jefferson, Steven Spielberg, Bill Gates is believed to possibly have autism. All these people have a talent that they are bringing out to the world, whether they may disclose it or accept the autism about themselves or not. Now we get to the communication challenges. Did you know that 90% of your communication is nonverbal? Body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, posture. It's not always just the words. And all too often, people with autism tend to see what they hear. So, for instance, they wouldn't pick up the sarcasm in this, "I'm having a great day." A person with autism just hears, "I'm having a great day," and thinks, "Okay, that's cool." But you know there's something else going on there. People with autism have to be directly and explicitly taught about social skills and this 90% of their communication that they do not have experience in. And I had to go to a school called the Help Group in Sherman Oaks for 10th and 11th grade in order to boost my social skills and connect the dots. But once it was brought to my attention, it made sense. So that's the SBC portion of autism. Then we get into the global aspect, which is their response to their external environment. Bright lights, fireworks, loud music, certain textures or itchy clothing. It's intolerable for some people with autism. Like when I was young, fireworks, it was like being in a war zone for me. I couldn't stand to hear them at all. But nowadays, with enough occupational therapy and enough life experience and having maybe an escape, like going to the men's room, if you will, I can go to a loud club or bar and interact with others. But there are some people with autism that just cannot tolerate that sensation, or think of it as a thermostat inside you. There are those that are hypersensitive, and then there are those that are hyposensitive. So one time when I was in 6th grade, I was wearing a lot of clothing, it was really hot, and I actually passed out. It didn't occur to me, and it didn't register with me internally that maybe I should remove the jacket. Or maybe you've heard on the news about a young man who was wandering around in the cold and snow with nothing but his underpants. Probably has some hyposensitivity and his internal thermostat is broken, probably on the autism spectrum. So these are some examples of how SBC Global is found in someone with autism. In some cases it's obvious just by looking at them. In some cases it might not be so obvious. It's a very mysterious condition. So I'm gonna summarize what I've learned over the years. When I was really young, I wanted to be perfect. I told my mother this, "Mom, I need to be perfect." And she responded, "Why?" "Because you're perfect," I said. And she explained to me that she was far from perfect. And she actually, from that point on, started to verbalize her thought process a little more. Like with me, I'm awesome at reading maps and knowing where I am in directions and in space and such, whereas she couldn't read a map to save her life and constantly gets lost while we drive. But she started letting her mindset and what she was doing be more known to me, so that way I could be more alert and realize that it's okay to not be perfect. Pleasing everyone, it's not possible. People with autism do want to make friends, they do want to fit in, but at the same time, it may come to the point where they don't say no. And they also don't pick up on other people's ill will or bad intentions. That's why the population is particularly vulnerable and are 7 times more likely to be involved in a criminal or an abuse situation. They get used and they get abused. See, we have a dog here, and I have my own dog at home, a little wiener dog. And having pets. So maybe interacting with people didn't work out, but you still want love and to be loved. Having a pet is such a great way to make that happen. In fact, if you go to my website, thomasiland.com, I have a blog, 7 friendship skills I learned from my dog, and lots of pictures. So this is me and my mother. She is a past president of the Autism Society of Los Angeles. She was my first advocate and my #1 ally from the get-go. She let me know that off the cuff. She wasn't very accepting of my diagnosis at first. Her sister, my aunt, was the autism specialist for the state of Illinois. That's where I was born. And when my aunt suggested at first that I may have autism, my mother dismissed it. "Oh, he's too smart to have autism." But lots of geniuses play in the corner by themselves or can't interact with other people. But it wasn't until about 9 years later, when it was first brought to our attention, that I was officially diagnosed. The diagnostic and statistical manuals had been revised so that you can be smart and have autism. So at that point, she let me know that she was never going to stop fighting for me. She would not take no for an answer. Where there was a will, there would be a way. And if you speak Spanish, querer es poder. Basically, her fighting for me and she being able to let it be known to those that could get me what I want, what I needed. I discovered that I'm worth fighting for. And so I became my own self-advocate, started speaking up for myself. And it all started with her. And that she explained to me, I'm not perfect and you don't have to be either. I've met Temple Grandin, Dr. Temple Grandin, many times. This is me and her at CSUN. I introduced her and she gave a speech there last month. She wrote a book, The Way I See It. I read this book, and in it she explains how you cannot live your life to please others. You have to be true to yourself. It's okay to say no, because if you keep saying yes to things that you don't want to, it's you that becomes unhappy. And then your life starts to hurt because you wanted to please others, but as we'll explain in my mantra later, it starts with you loving yourself. Even if that means putting up healthy boundaries and saying no when you need to. Here's Bridget. She's in the brochure that some of you guys, well, she's a 12-year-old mini purebred dachshund. She's like a daughter to me. I think they say dogs are the new kids, but I think I would much rather have a dog than a kid in some respects. And as I mentioned in the blog, some of the things I talk about, how they always greet you with a wagging tail and want to give you kisses when you get home. We as people like to be greeted and acknowledged when we enter social settings, so we can learn that from our dogs. Our dogs are also great listeners. How many of you talk to your pets? They're not going to judge you. They don't listen to respond. If anything, whatever you may say to them, they'll just give you kisses or acknowledge you and think you're the best thing anyway. You can just just totally brighten your day when you've had the worst day ever. Another great thing about dogs is they give unconditional love, and they set the bar high for yourself. So I'm her world, and she's my world, so I do my best to be the best person possible because she depends on it. Now we're going to get into the meaning of life. Now, the meaning of life has been pondered for many, many years by so many people, religious leaders, philosophers, Monty Python, but really what it boils down to is it's not an actual word, it's an acronym. And it stands for these 4 elements, all of which people with autism struggle with. As we go further and further down the list, the bigger the struggle gets. So we have love and relationships, independent living, further education, and employment. These are the 4 elements of life that we'll discuss when it comes to autism. So looking at love and relationships, it starts in the family. Knowing that you have a disability and your parents being able to communicate that you have a disability. Because oftentimes parents think the child will not understand the diagnosis, or if they're told this diagnosis is in them, they're going to be heartbroken and their self-esteem will just plummet and never come back. Now I did have that when I was first told at 13. I thought to myself, my brain is broken, this is terrible, I'm never going to recover from this. So after about 45 minutes to an hour in my room crying, I came back and said to my mom, you know, Mom, this explains a lot. Because up to that point, I had been rearranging magnetized letters into words on the refrigerator. I had been rewinding videos just for my favorite parts over and over again. I would even say lines from movies. We call it video talk in the family. That I heard from a movie, but may not necessarily apply to the conversation. These were all aspects of autism in me, and it served as an explanation, the diagnosis. So that explains why all this was happening. There are so many people out there that are going throughout their lives without a diagnosis, without an explanation, no answers whatsoever. They're in the dark and they do not know what to do or where to go. So with my parents and also with my siblings, I have a younger sister and a younger brother. When it came to finding a girlfriend, I really wanted a girlfriend when I was young. And it was my sister that put things into perspective for me. Tom, girls like a guy who keeps himself clean. Girls like a guy who knows how to dance. Girls like a guy who knows how to cook. Girls like a guy who treats his family well. So I cleaned myself up, learned how to cook, learned how to dance. I started treating my family better, and now I get dates. But another great thing about relationships, making and maintaining them, is finding common interests. For me, I really, really love Star Wars. So I would find somebody that liked Star Wars, and we could talk about that all day long. But I realize not everyone wants to talk about Star Wars all day long. So I took an interest in other people. What did they have to say? What do they think about certain topics? And that can be difficult for someone with autism, because once they get fixated on a certain topic, and they want to know everything about it, then it starts to make them look a little odd and maybe not so much on the social front. But I can also tell you that reality TV really helped me a lot, because there was a show that aired about 10 years ago called Beauty and the Geek. I don't know if any of you remember this show. It takes 8 very intelligent but not so social guys, probably people with autism, and paired them up with 8 beautiful women that had gotten by on their looks most of their lives. So they get paired up and they have to do a series of physical and mental challenges, and they start to learn from one another. Halfway through each season, the guys would get makeovers. New hair, new clothes, eyebrows waxed, and because of that show, I get my eyebrows waxed every 6 weeks to this day. Had my appointment today. The point is, sometimes young people with autism do not know those social cues because, like we talked about earlier, they've been banished. They don't have the experience. They haven't been interacting with other people. They've been focusing on their special interests. So when it comes time to make friends with the opposite gender, it doesn't work out. So having that experience is the missing piece of the puzzle. We also get into personal and professional relationships. When I went went to CSUN, I discovered it's not just what you know nowadays, it's who you know. Because someone you know might be able to get you your first job, or an interview to get a job, or something you otherwise would be able to get on your own. So utilizing those connections, realizing the value you create and the value you receive from those relationships allow you to have better love and relationships in your life. When we get into independent living, a lot of people with autism, well into their adulthood, are still living with their parents. And the parents might be under the impression of the belief that they're going to raise the kid until the day they die. Fortunately, that wasn't the case with me, because my mother, being the proactive woman that she was and still is, wanted to create the potential for me to have my own life. So when I was 16 years old, I went to this condo complex, and my mother had gotten me a condo saying, Tom, one day you're going to live here. It was near the local community college, and I knew I was going to have a life of my own. And that gave me hope. That empowered me to give me something to work towards. And learning how to drive is another thing that people with autism struggle with. They may have difficulty with motor coordination, or the judgment and the multiple parts and functions of having to do the driving. So they take public transportation, or they just give up on the idea of driving completely. For me, I had private driving lessons, and my mother told the instructor, the cash box is open, the clock is not running, bring him back when he's ready. About 30 driving lessons later, I finally was ready and passed the driving test on the first attempt. So it's really practice that makes perfect, and finding the right environment and having the time constraints lifted. Because that's what people with autism really need a lot, or more of. Time, patience, being able to just take some time to think. And I have had my experiences of having a woman live with me, and I've also had a girlfriend who was also on the autism spectrum live with me. And after those experiences, I've found that just me and Bridget is my most ideal living situation. I get to stay up as late as I want. If she barks, and she does often, it's not a huge issue. And I'm happy living just with a dog. I do have a girlfriend. We live in separate houses at the moment, but the experience of having a roommate, a girlfriend live with me, and being on my own, I decided on my own I want to live by myself. And by maintaining the household, by majoring in accounting, I got to know what's involved in budgeting, and I'm really good with the numbers aspect of living on my own and creating a schedule for what chores need to be done and such. This is the kind of things you don't necessarily learn in school. How many of you still use a checkbook, and how many of you know how to balance it? Only a few hands. Balancing a checkbook, if you still use one. The point is, these are all very advanced, systematic items that people with autism either do not know about or have had someone do for them their entire lives and have never really had the opportunity to experience. So it's a little bit of an injustice for the young people with autism to not be able to experience that. And there are parents that will kind of hover over, like the helicopter parents, rather than teach the children how to do these skills so they can use it in later years in their life, because the parents are not going to be around forever. And we get to further education. This is another difficulty when it comes to autism and the people that have it. For those that do graduate high school and go off to college, the independent life and the whole difficult change of environment, it can be very overwhelming. For me, I did go to high school and was scheduled to graduate with honors because my academics lined up. I was on the honor roll. Was I ready because of those aspects of independent living? Did I have what I needed to live on my own? The answer was no. Thankfully, again, my mother saw the problem here and brought it to the district, the Hart School District's attention during my individualized education plan. You may look good academically, but you have to deliver on your promise to the district to give him occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, independent living, and she had the facts to back it up. Because of that, my diploma was held. I still got to walk with the rest of my students, but inside was a note saying, please see the Director of Special Education for my diploma. He was keeping it in his drawer in his office. It was being held before the district did their part. Had that not happened, I probably would not be the person I am today. But so many young people with autism and disabilities are taking those diplomas. It's an exit document. When they take that exit document, that means I'm academically, socially, and independently ready to go on to college. I no longer need services from the district. But the truth is, they still very much do need services from the district in prepping for college and their independent lives. So by taking that document, it's like a door closing behind them and locking. No going back. So I'm very grateful that I had a mother that saw this coming and that I was able to have the best college life possible. Within college, requesting accommodations, mapping out my accounting degree, because there are so many people with autism, even without disabilities, that kind of go through college life wondering, what am I going to major in? What classes am I going to take? There's no roadmap, not working towards a greater goal. So for me, I wanted to be George Lucas's accountant. I knew that from my senior year in high school. And I said that to my mother, and she, rather than thinking it was some kind of absurd pipe dream, said, okay, you want to be George Lucas's accountant? Here's what needs to happen. And we mapped it out. Now, she also wrote a book on reading comprehension. It's called Drawing a Blank, Improving Comprehension for Readers on the Autism Spectrum, because when it comes to reading, people with autism are very literal thinkers, very concrete. They may not grasp those abstract concepts like foreshadowing or symbolism or irony. So when they read something and they don't understand it, they're going to stop reading. Now, do you at LMU here have to pass the upper division writing proficiency exam to get a degree, or maybe that was just Cal State Northridge? But that's another thing that people with autism struggle with, writing. Can you write a 5-paragraph essay with a clear opening, body, and conclusion? In many cases, the answer is no. And even the transition from a high school setting to a huge university setting, that's what's causing the people with autism to go for it only to fail and boomerang back to their parents' house or wherever they may have come from. So by realizing, A, that these issues have to be addressed, and B, taking the necessary steps, and me taking the necessary steps, because I remember one time I was at Cal State Northridge. I was explaining to the accounting department chair my accommodations or what I would need to pass exams, and I said to her, if you have any questions, please call this number. I slid her my mother's card, and she said, what am I supposed to do with this? I realized it was up to me. I had to be the one that was responsible for my success. I had to be the one that spoke up for myself. And I have a concept in my upcoming book called Being the Hero in Your Life Story. Because people with autism love to pretend they're heroes. So you can pretend, let's say somebody likes X-Men, and I actually did have this happen. A young man likes X-Men. He's having difficulty going to his professor for help. So I tell him, okay, pretend you're an X-Man, and you're going to see Professor Xavier for help. His face lit up, and that gave him that boost, that confidence to get the job done. And the great thing about requesting accommodations in school is it can also apply to outside the school setting. So for me, having a vocabulary deficiency, not knowing words like conservative or aggregate or perpetuality, these words were going to be on the CPA exam, and I couldn't ask the proctor what they meant. I had the test results taken and the data gathered to present to the Board of Accounting, and the board says, you're right, you do have a vocabulary deficiency and you need some accommodations to pass the exam. We're going to send you a Franklin electronic dictionary that you can use during the exam. Who would have thought that accommodation would be available if you didn't gather the data and explain why it was needed, and that I could get the exam completed with that accommodation? It's amazing what you can accomplish and what can be given to you if you just ask for help and know why you are asking for help. And this is the most difficult topic when it comes to people with autism, it's employment. Over 80% of people with autism are unemployed, have no job at all, or they're underemployed. They are working, but not enough to make ends meet or to be gainfully employed, putting some money away in savings. And the reason for this is, a lot of times during the interview, HR person or the recruiting personnel can probably sense something is off. Somebody's rocking, or can't look somebody in the eye, or doesn't seem to communicate effectively. That resume gets tossed out. Next. So for me, my time at CSUN and the Accounting Association helped me practice mock interviewing and resume writing and elevator interviews. So I had that professional experience and training to proceed in an interview and have it go well. And there's even interview etiquette, like how you email or send a card, maybe a thank you card the day after, thanking the person for the interview. It's the little things that count. Once the young people with autism know what to do, they can likely do better in an interview. Then we get to the item of disclosing or not disclosing in an interview. I've had it go well and not so well both ways. I'll start with my internship with the Walt Disney Company. I got it from my fellow student at CSUN. He was interning, and he let his managers know that I might be a good match. So they interviewed me, and I ended up getting the position. I had not disclosed my disability at that point, but I still got the job. And in the first week of the internship, the manager asked each of me, there are about 5 of us, 5, 6 interns, pulled each one of us aside privately to ask, how are things going? Are you understanding the material? I wasn't understanding the material. Things were not going well for me. So that's when I took the opportunity to disclose. Thankfully, she was receptive. Why? Because A, I had told her what's happening, and B, I explained to her how she can help me. Because many people with autism, or maybe an advocate of somebody with autism, will say, this person has a disability, what are you going to do about it? Putting it in the employer's court. But for me, I knew how autism affected me. So I told my manager, if you'll just bear with me, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions, sometimes the same question more than once. And if you can give me my directions in writing, that would help. So I stayed on board and even got promoted within the organization to a lead intern, because I had disclosed and because I had the procedures down. And I wrote a little manual, a script on how to complete a property tax return, and the interns that I supervised got their work done faster than ever in the department's history. So the potential of our young people with autism is enormous. They may have a way to rewrite a procedure or make it more efficient amongst the employees, or better workplace rapport, better relationships with clients, but it's not being realized because they're not being given a chance. Now that was the Disney was the one time that I did not disclose. Now I'll tell you about a time where I did disclose, but it was after I got the job. It was at a company. It was my first ever permanent job with benefits. I only had internships up to that point. First permanent job with benefits. And my manager knew my former manager from Disney. Was having difficulty the first week on the job. I explained to him I have autism. His response was not welcoming. He told me, you tricked me. You withheld that information. I don't have to help you, and I'm not going to. Which is illegal, first of all. You have to give reasonable accommodations to somebody with a disability if they so disclose. He did not. So I kept on going for about 4 months, and I was not liking the work, dreading to go into work. I had HR involved. I even brought a job coach at no cost to the company to help with the interactions. But I realized I didn't need this, and I resigned after 4 months. They did, however, offer me another job in the company. There's a significant pay cut, and they kind of had to make up the duties as they went along. But I didn't have anything else lined up, so I accepted. And I ended up staying for 2 more years and created more value in the new job than I probably did in the old one. And got more exposure to other topics of accounting, finance, treasury, international accounting, internal audit. I wouldn't have had this opportunity otherwise. And they also knew that I was quite the grammar warrior, so they would have me, I worked with the company's executives, they would have me review the reports that they would be issuing to the government and their investors, looking for those grammatical errors or punctuation. It's a bit of a forte of mine. So that's an example of how strengths among the autism community can be utilized once they are given that opportunity to do so. Now we're going to get into my mantra. It's know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. My mother had asked me, if you could tell self-advocates, that's people with autism, one thing, what would it be? And this is my response. Know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Knowing what your disability is. We mentioned earlier how so many people go about their whole lives without answers, without an explanation or something to call it what's going on with them. And even once they do know what it is, they're still not sure how to see it or how to interpret it. And even something as simple as how you say it or how you describe the disability can make all the difference. Think of the labels you might be putting on yourself. I'm just no good. Or your parents may say, my son will never be able to do that. When the kids hear this, they take it to heart. And it's on their mind constantly. Take a picture if you want, it'll last longer. I'm going to talk about person-first language versus identity-first language. Example of person-first language, Tom is a person with autism, or Tom has autism. Seeing that you have a living, breathing human being first, and not letting the disability necessarily define the person. Then you have identity-first language. Tom is an autistic person, or Tom is an autistic. Tom is autistic. My family used person-first language in our household, and I would have to say it made all the difference. Because by not letting autism define me, yes, I still have it, I still have to accept it, and I will, and I did, but it doesn't have to be the very thing that defines me. Because I can do what I want. I have what it takes. I can do anything I put my heart and my mind to. What kind of labels are you putting on yourself? What kind of labels are you putting on others? How much of a difference it can make if you see the potential rather than give up hope. Because knowing yourself, knowing you have a condition, where you come from, is key. Aristotle once said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. And we are on ongoing journeys to better lives. And we take on more and more knowledge in that journey. So think of it as driving a car. The knowledge that you take in is like the fuel. You fill her up and you got the engine running and the knowledge of the fuel's kind of burning out the exhaust pipe. Make sure you remove that emergency brake and you start to drive forward. And as you go through life, you have to fill up some more. I need more information on getting a job. Fill her up. Apply it. Move forward. I need more information on living on my own. Fill her up. I want to find a good girlfriend. Fill her up. And this is an ongoing process. With the exception of maybe those fuel-efficient cars, those cars that don't require fuel, but they still have to be charged up. The point is, you keep on going. Fill up. Fill up. Never stop learning. Because not everybody knows everything. Nobody's expected to know everything. You have a journey that is ahead of you. So once you know yourself, once you know about your condition, what's going on with you, that gets to loving yourself. Because there's so many people with a disability that do not accept it, or others not accept them at first, but realizing that it starts with you. I mentioned how I couldn't stand the thought of having a diagnosis when I was young, but I eventually picked myself up. There's so many people that have difficulty picking themselves up. They think they're broken, and they're not able to bounce back. They think that if they just sit back and wait, they'll be loved. But the ripple effect tells us starting within and working your way out. Because when you love yourself, others will love you in return. Putting up those healthy boundaries, saying no when you mean it, or when you are legitimately unavailable or unaware of the topic that's being discussed or what's asked of you. Also being able to forgive yourself and forgive others. Because if you have difficulty forgiving yourself, or you're living in the past, that's like driving forward while looking in the rearview mirror the entire time. I'm so angry all the time. You start to weave a little bit. Life sucks. When are things going to get better? And then all of a sudden, you lose sight of what's right in front of you. That's why it's imperative that you learn from the past, live in the present, and look towards the future. Because by focusing on the past, there's nothing you can do about the past, it's gone. But by learning from it, so you don't make the same mistakes again, that allows you to keep moving forward and plan ahead as to what's coming. There are a lot of young people with autism that struggle with empathy. I once told my mother, "Mom, if it hasn't happened to me, my mind is a blank page." That's how she came up with the title, Drawing a Blank. The point is, people with autism often cannot, you say, take a walk in that person's shoes, or walk a mile in that person's shoes, and they may literally think, okay, can you give me your shoes, please? They don't understand the idioms, first of all, but they also don't understand the emotional concept. So for me, something that's really helped me in the past 2 years, improve my empathy and my understanding of others, is meditation. I meditate most mornings, and in the evenings too, and it has helped me tremendously. A lot of people think medication is the answer. What about meditation? Medication, think of it as a weed. Medication only cuts the weed off at the surface. Meditation gets to the root of the matter. So by taking some time to sit in silence and stillness, which can be difficult for some people with autism, but once they really make that effort to embrace and look within, that's going to make them into better people. Which brings us to the next item of being yourself. More specifically, being your best self. Now, I had a girlfriend with autism. She moved here from Illinois to be with me. We'd known each other for years. We both knew we had autism. She came out here, had grown up in a rural part of Illinois her whole life. She came out here, it was a bit of a culture shock for her, but she had also not had services her whole life. No speech therapy, no job support, no independent living. My mother and I got those services for her, so she could finally get some help and be her best self. The problem is, she told her mother about what was happening, and the mother responded, "They're looking to change you. Don't let them." As a result, she resisted, my ex-girlfriend resisted everything. All the services, all the help, all the support. She wasn't becoming her best self. And as a result, my life started to take a turn for the worst. So as she was leaving to go back to Illinois, she mentioned, "It's a shame you were looking to change me this entire time. I like myself just fine." And that was a shock to my mother. She said, "We weren't looking to change you. We wanted to help you be the best person you could be." And this is difficult when it comes to people with autism. They fear change. Any uncertainty, any change in their routine or what's expected can be chaotic for them. It can be absolute hell, if you'll pardon the term. result, they shut off any possibility of change. They're not open to others' opinions or constructive criticism or the possibility of synergizing, that more heads are better than one. Getting back to our car example, how many of you have driven a really, really old clunker? It's got like hundreds of thousands of miles on it. It's getting more difficult to run. You're still moving forward, but much slower than everyone else. Harder and harder to maintain. So what do you do in this situation? Find out what other cars are out there. See what other options are available for you. You still get to drive. That's being yourself. But really enjoying the ride, that's being your best self. By realizing that it's okay to have change. If anything, you should welcome the change rather than fear it. I know I had difficulty accepting change at first, but once I realized that I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago, 5 months ago, or even 5 minutes ago, change is happening whether I want it to or not. There are forces out there much bigger than any one of us, but we are one with those changes, and we are open to them, or at least we should be. So what I'd like to see, the change I would like to see in the world, as Gandhi says, is to be open to that change. Be open to the constructive criticism, be open to others' opinions, so that way all the ideas can get out there and you can make the best educated decision possible. So in summary, these are the items that we discussed today. We went over the SBC Global, the science of autism, and maybe you'll be able to identify it out in the field there. What I've learned over the years, those 3 Ps about perfection is not plausible, pleasing everybody is not possible, and that pets are good pals and help you be a pal too. And the meaning of life, love and relationships, independent living, further education, and employment. These are all things that people with autism struggle with and can be worked on, and any help you can be towards a person with autism in the elements of life will make their life and their world that much better. And whether you have disability or not, may you know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, so that you may be your best self. You've been such a wonderful audience. Thank you all very much for your time.